Hello and welcome everyone to today's conversation, 4 steps to motivate follow through. Very excited about where we're going. For those of you that have done your coach training, it's going to be some great review. For those of you who have not yet done coach training, it's going to be some good insight on information in terms of how to really work effectively with individuals. We have a fast 30 minutes to cover this. I do want to make sure we invite questions throughout. So if you want to raise your hand, I can unmute you and you can ask your question, or you can type it in to the control panel as we go through so that you get those things answered. What is our agenda for the conversation? We are all about looking at follow through. So I'm going to start out with, hey, what does that mean? And right here, you'll see it. When you are aware of somebody's personal style, in other words, the way they think, they process, and they function, you're effectively adjusting to them in the moment. And that supports rapport. It enhances communication because you'll have a better understanding with each other. And that sets you up to ask those powerful coaching questions, which in turn is going to support your client moving forward. They engage and they're empowered. That's the intention. That's what it's about. So, what are the learning outcomes we're looking for today? When you are working with people, we want to support you recognizing their style and selecting how to interact with them with intention. When you're working with people, differentiate what they are moving toward and how they are motivated. When you're working with them, use powerful questions to stimulate their awareness and ask them to define their ideal outcome and their action steps. Because when they define it, that's how you empower that ownership. How are we going to get there? We will start out by talking about how to recognize and adjust to different personal styles. We'll talk about maintaining that focus forward and exploring internal motivations, powerful questioning, and then empowering for ownership. So starting out with different personal styles, and hopefully this is familiar to those of you that have done the training. We're talking about people, and people think, feel, and prioritize differently. Who we are, our own style, influences how we think, feel, and prioritize. So what does that mean to you? When you're working with somebody else, a lot of us are familiar with the golden rule. And the golden rule is to treat other people the way you want to be treated. And Dr. Tony Alessandra coined the platinum rule. And that is treat other people the way they want to be treated. Because ultimately, they are different. And how they want to be treated is different than how we want to be treated. I think that's really the intent of the golden rule, if you will. So what we know is that when we're coaching somebody, demonstrating respect means learning about and understanding them because we adjust to them. Well, how do you do that? The first thing you want to do is recognize whether this person is primarily emotion or primarily logic. And by the way, statistically, it's about 50-50. Now, we all use both emotion and logic, and we know that half the time people are most likely primarily emotion and half the time most likely primarily logic. So it's an even split. How do you know which one someone is? Chances are those words alone, if you think about it and pay attention to it, are going to get you there. You can make a pretty good guess. Oh, yeah, that's what this is for this person. To give you additional hints for that, very specifically, someone who is emotion is going to talk about feelings. Someone who is logic is more about the tasks If somebody is emotion, they want to share people stories. If somebody is logic, it's all about the planning. If somebody is emotion, they express compassion. If somebody is logic, they're all about the results. So when you're having a conversation with someone, identify, recognize what it is. And when it changes because the conversation changes, something else goes on, recognize when it's changing. So whichever one that person is using, be aware of it and adjust to them. Another thing to be aware of is whether their communication style is primarily passive or primarily aggressive. If somebody is primarily passive, they're very cautious. If they're aggressive, they're opinionated. They'll tell you their opinion, probably whether or not you want to hear it. And sometimes they'll even tell you your opinion too. If somebody is passive, they will take time to think about things. And what that means is if you ask them a question, go silent. They're thinking, they're processing. And if you interrupt their thinking, they don't have a chance to finish. So staying quiet is respecting their opportunity to think. On the other side of it, if somebody is aggressive, they'll jump right in. So they often think out loud. And I'm going to say this, stay silent and let them think out loud. They'll say multiple things before they decide which one it is that they intend or want. If somebody is passive, they're indecisive. If somebody is aggressive, they're fast-paced. They'll decide without even having all the information. They move so quickly. Now, statistically, 70% of the population is primarily passive, and 30% of the population is primarily aggressive. So, very interesting to note, more of us are passive than aggressive. We all use both. So again, which one is it right this minute? Which one is it in the moment? And I see a hand up. So Juan Carlos, I'm going to unmute you. What's your question?
Hello, Kathy. This is
Yeah, go ahead, Juan Carlos.
Juan Carlos. Just a little to you again. Just in terms of this statistic of 70% of the population is passive, 30% of it's aggressive. Just a reference of a population of what country and what time, or when was that performed? Just to have that reference.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Great question. And I'm going to put you back on mute and answer that. So first off, the research on it, some of it dates back to Plato, and it really is global in terms of which country it applies to, et cetera. What I can tell you is a great place to go look at some of that research is look at the research that was done for some of the well-known personality assessments. So if you look at what's behind the DISC or the Myers-Briggs, you're going to see information like that. There are also a couple of really good series out that are on communication, and they talk about it as well. Now, I will say sometimes the statistic is different by a point or two, depending on who's got it and what you're reading. I'm giving you a number that's really in the middle of what's out there as far as the research on it. So there are a lot of sources. Sometimes the easiest way to find them is simply Google 70% passive, 30% aggressive, and you'll see some things start to pop up. So hopefully that helps. If you have a follow-up question, obviously feel free. Okay, I'm seeing your thank you in the question box. So perfect. All right. So when you are working with somebody else, if you adjust to them, you're going to be more effective in interacting with them. And if you're more effective interacting with them, guess what? That sets you up in order to really motivate them and get that change going on. Keep in mind that everybody perceives others differently. So how we see someone else who's also passive, or if I'm passive and someone else is aggressive, logic, emotion, all of those combinations, it changes how we perceive others. I'll give you an example. Somebody who is logic and aggressive, is going to see somebody who is passive and emotion as weak. And somebody who is passive in emotion is going to see that logic aggressive person as intimidating and rude. And there's may or may not be an awareness of what's behind those perceptions. So it's really, number one, recognizing it, because when you're coaching somebody, it's on you to recognize who they are and adjust to them in the moment based on who they are, and recognize that some of the things they're dealing with, some of the different relationships and people they're dealing with are also influenced by these differences. And it changes. My favorite example is when I'm at home, I'm most often passive and emotion. When I'm at work, I'm most often logic and aggressive. When I'm out with my friends, I'm most often emotion and aggressive. And sometimes I'm working on a project and I then shift into being logic and passive. So I use all of them. We all do. It's which one is it right now? Recognizing it and adjusting to it. Essential for effectively motivating someone else and having a good conversation too. Now, the next piece after you work with which they are is to be aware of how they're focused. So the example we talked about in class is the meta program of toward versus away. Quite simply, whether somebody is talking about what they do want or they're talking about what they don't want. I think my favorite way of explaining this is, imagine I go into a travel agent and I say to the travel agent, I want to go on vacation, book me a trip. And the agent says, fabulous, where do you want to go? And I start saying, well, I don't want to go. And I start listing all these places that I don't want to go. Maybe I've already been there, or there just isn't what appeals to me, etc. And if I get stuck talking about what I don't want, how is that travel agent possibly going to book that trip? So instead, they have to ask me, okay, where do you want to go? And when I start talking about where I do want to go, then that travel agent can work with me on booking the trip. So it's the difference between focusing on what's behind you. So in this picture, imagine a support vehicle driving behind a runner, or imagine that support vehicle going out in front of the person and the runner is focused on getting to them, on their next milestone, their next objective, their next goal. When you want to work with somebody and really support their motivation, get them talking about what they do want, what they're moving toward. It is also important when you're having the conversation with them that you talk about their source of motivation. So, for example, if somebody is externally motivated, they're doing something for someone else or to avoid a consequence, it's a short-term result. If somebody is internally motivated, you get a long-term result. So here's an example. If my goal is around weight, let's say I start out saying, oh, I want to lose 50 pounds. Okay, that's a weigh. How much do I want to weigh? And so you ask me what I do want it to be. And I say, oh, well, I want to weigh 150. You say, okay, great. What does it mean to you? And you're asking about my motivation. And I say to you, well, then my husband won't think I'm so fat. Okay, that's an external motivation, and I am less likely to follow through. If you say to me, okay, and what does it mean to you personally? And I say, oh, well, I'll feel better. I'll have more energy. My clothes will fit more comfortably. I'll feel good about myself. Now you have my internal motivation. When somebody identifies their internal motivation, you increase their follow through and you get the long-term result. So if you want to motivate somebody, ask them for their internal motivation. What does that mean to you? So very quickly, when they explain what they don't want, you ask them what they do want, and you ask them for their internal motivation for whatever change it is you're working on. So you've got a couple of tips going. I'm going to give you another one. And this is probably the toughest one for all of us. And it's this. The example I used in class, if you took class, is if I'm a parent and I'm talking to my child and I'm telling them, oh, you need to go clean your room. You need to pick up all the clothes. You need to put away your things, organize your books, da, da, da. And I'm telling them everything. What are they actually hearing? Well, they're hearing nothing. They're hearing Charlie Brown's teacher, blah, blah, blah. And so we talk about what's the point? If they're not hearing it anyway, it's a waste of time and energy. So very specifically, stop telling. It ain't working. And here's the challenge. We have the mistaken idea that telling people the answer is helpful. And the reality is it doesn't work. If you look at what's going on in the workplace, if you look at conversations, when somebody is told, they're less likely to follow through and do something. If instead we ask them, what do you want? How are you going to do it? What are the reasons for doing it? What do you want the outcome to be? When we ask them and they figure it out and they come up with the answers, then it happens. And the reason it happens is because they own it. And in coaching, one of the biggest paradigm shifts we all go through when we do our training is that shift from telling to asking. And when you ask, that's when you get the result. In keeping with that, when you're having the conversation, it is very important to get away from the problem. It's so easy to get stuck talking about who said something, who did something, what the problem is. And then we stay stuck. So much like you want to start asking, start focusing on solutions. Because if you're asking about the problem, you stay stuck. If you're asking about the solution, it gives you the opportunity for moving forward. So focus on solutions. Ask about where they want to go and how they want to get there. How are they going to make it work? All right. Questions. How you ask those questions in terms of where they're going? Oh my goodness, so essential. And your words will change your question completely. One of the things we work on in our coach training is how we ask our questions. So let's look at a few examples or tips for asking powerful questions. The first one is that the question focuses forward. Where do we want to go? What do we want to accomplish? And it's that forward movement that's essential. We talked about being toward what we want. It is also absolutely essential that the question is open to possibility. If we asked a closed question, a leading question, we're just getting stuck again. When we ask a question that's completely open to whatever it may be, that's when you're really motivating someone else because they get to figure it out and they get to own it. Now, another interesting thing that comes up is often whatever answer somebody gives you to a question actually gives you the next question. So back on my goal of, I want to weigh 150 pounds, you say, great. How are you going to do that? How are you going to reach that goal of weighing 150 pounds? So I say, oh, well, I'm going to exercise more. And then you say, how will you exercise more? So you're using my response in the next question. And here's the biggest tip for coaches. It is so important. Your questions 90+% of the time start with the words what or how. And when you ask what or how questions, that's where you have those open-ended questions and you really put the other person in charge so they figure it out. and that's going to motivate. So empowering for ownership means we adjust to the client. We start out by recognizing who they are. Are they emotional? Are they logic? Are they passive? Are they aggressive? And we adjust to them based on who they are. We keep the focus on what they do want, what they're moving toward. We explore their internal motivation. We ask powerful questions. Plus, we're going to empower ownership. So how do we do that? Well, one key piece to empowering ownership is talking about them being proactive instead of reactive. If somebody's reactive, they're waiting for something else to happen. They're waiting for something else to change, and they're just waiting. If somebody is proactive, they're stepping out there and taking action. So if we really want to motivate change, asking things such as, what is possible? What can you do? What is within your control? To move them to proactively planning what they're going to do. That supports them. So very specifically, it's adjusting to their style and asking questions so they create their own proactive plan. I'm guessing most of you have seen the research on coaching and how it works. You've seen the average return on investment of 600%. Okay, 600%. How does it get that high? And it's because as coaches, we really put the client in charge of figuring out their own answer and moving toward it. Now, I'll give you one extra secret on empowering your client. And those of you who have done the training are familiar with it. You want to ask them to describe their ideal outcome. And when you ask them to describe their ideal outcome, have them describe it completely. You want a 3D description, Technicolor, all the bells and whistles. So very specifically, what does that mean? You want them to describe what they're going to see. Literally have them imagine being there in that place after achieving the success, and they describe what they see around them. They describe expressions on faces, colors, scenery, office setting, whatever it is, and describe everything about what they see. And you have them talk about what they hear. What are the sounds in that place? What are they saying to themselves? And they fully describe what they hear after they achieve that success. And then talk about how it feels to them. What are they experiencing? What are they feeling? What are they doing when they've achieved that success? And have them describe all of that fully. Because when an individual describes their ideal outcome completely using visual, auditory, and kinesthetic language, what happens is in their own mind, it becomes real. And when it's real in their mind, then they move toward it. They're motivated and they want to make it happen. So it supports them moving forward. If you want to motivate someone else, it's a powerful, powerful technique. So where does that bring us? Well, in terms of application of these tips, number one, recognize and adjust to the client. Who are they? How are they thinking? How are they processing? And how are they functioning? Number two, in the conversation with them, focus on where they do want to go, what they want it to be, and ask them about their internal motivation. When you are asking questions, use those tips we gave you for the questions where it's forward focused, they're open to possibilities, your answer gives the next question, and ask what or how. What or how questions. And then your next tip, empower ownership. And you empower ownership by having them proactively plan for where they want to go. And if we take that to the next level, you empower ownership by having them describe their ideal outcome fully, completely, in all 3 of the visual, auditory, and kinesthetic languages. Okay, so I'm thinking a lot of refresher for those of you who have done coach training. Hopefully that's helpful to you, and hopefully it's good insight for those of you who have yet to do coach training. So I'm going to shift now into talking about resources for you. So first off, of course, the International Coach Federation, fabulous research. They do a ton of research. If you're a member, there's a portal for accessing that research, and it's fabulous because there's a lot of science behind this information and how it works. So it's a great resource for that. You also have, of course, the Center for Coaching Certification, where we provide the coach training, and the Center for Coaching Solutions. We provide coaches, we provide coaching program support inside of organizations. So the International Coach Federation is at coachfederation.org. The Center for Coaching Certification is at coachcert.com. And the Center for Coaching Solutions, and we're bringing a lot of this content onto the coachcert.com website, so you can see it there as well. Plus, if you want additional sources for information, of course, we have a blog with new articles each week. We also publish a book once a year, and this year's book, Coaching Perspectives 8, is now available on Amazon. That just came available there, so we're super excited about that. These books are written by graduates of the coach training program. Every one of them has a different perspective, different insights, different tips, tools, and techniques, and each chapter is an individual read. So it means every book is completely different, and every chapter is its own read and completely different. So great content there. Plus, of course, we have these free webinars just like the one you're in right now. We do a 60-minute program every other month and a 30-minute program every month. Probably you're on the newsletter list, and so you'll get the reminder of upcoming webinars, plus they are listed on the website. So if you are interested in more information, we definitely want to be available to you. If you want to call or send an email to get additional information, happy to respond to that. We also are available to outsource support for coaching programs, to outsource training, and to outsource coaching. If you want to explore that fully, please let me know. We'll schedule a 30-minute conversation just to explore, hey, where do you want to go with that? And figure out how to best meet your objectives. Now, for yourself, what is your action plan? So hopefully this gave you some good reminders. Keep going. Go back and review your coach training. Be intentional about your application of the skills. If you've done your professional coach, keep going. Finish with your master coach so you can join the ICF. Think about engaging a coach for yourself, or those of you that know each other and have colleagues. Oh my goodness, take advantage of that and trade services and do that. And then, of course, where you want it, reach out for that coaching program support. So I do want to let all of you know I am happy to take additional questions and respond to those. Either raise your hand, type it into the question panel. In the meantime, I'm seeing the thank yous. So several of you have been typing things in. So thank you as well. Really glad it was helpful and a good review for you. I appreciate all of you being here, your time on this, and really making a difference. So great information. Do let us know what we can do to further support you and your success. So thank you, everyone. We're complete on time. So at this point, I'm just hanging out and checking to see if there's additional questions. And what I'm seeing scroll by in the question panel is all thank yous, and they're great notes. So thank you. Really glad this was helpful. Have a great day, everyone, and a great rest of the year. So take care now.